What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the stream. Welcome back to the channel. This is Phoenix coming to you live on Monday, September 26th. So hope everybody's well. And I don't know if you guys are actually working on your ideas through the Ideathon, but I thought I'd share my idea off this Ideathon. So yeah, hopefully I'm coming in okay. I'm just going to do a quick check on my stream to make sure, I'm coming in okay. So give me 1 second here. And should have probably done this earlier, but we're doing it live, so you know that's what happens when you roll like me. Just make sure here. Yes, I think we're live, so great. All right, so if you guys remember my last video, I had mentioned that I was working on an idea to, in my opinion, abstract away the barriers to interacting with smart contracts and blockchain technologies. And we do have wallets today that enable us to interact with applications, and through talking or interacting with those applications, we're able to then interact with contracts. But we've really, in some ways, moved away from the wallet to contract space, right? And to me, that's really interesting. I've kind of toyed with the idea of really understanding if maybe there's some value that's just been overlooked, right? You think about the fact that we live in a global world today. There's just exchanges of assets and value across the space, but we really don't have anything even in Ethereum that allows somebody to, with an application, interact with a contract almost like they would with Excel. If you think about before Excel was available, for example, I wouldn't know because I'm not that old, but I would imagine that with the advent of computers, companies hired developers, right, to build their spreadsheets and build their logic for them so that they can reconcile their accounting, look at different assets, right? And if you think about blockchain in some ways, there are some applications that require developers to build them, certainly from scratch, because they're unique. Their transactions and their logic layers are unique. But there's other things that certainly could potentially benefit from having access to blockchain and integrating external API sources into the development of logic, and then creating an action off of a contract. And doing that in a way that doesn't require advanced knowledge of EOS or Solidity or Ethereum. Because whether you know it or not, or I know it, the vast majority of developers and even people in the world do not care to invest time into learning how to interact with blockchains, right? Because time is money. And there just isn't that I think motivation to really to do that at this time. So this solution is really looking at the middle ground between using a blockchain technology, but also leveraging traditional ways in how we build applications, which is through APIs, and allowing the development of what I would characterize as a toolkit to play with different assets on a chain. And some particular value to this could be if you're in a company, or you're a part of an organization, or across multiple organizations where you're sharing assets but don't necessarily have agreement on the trust of maintaining that truth. Blockchain is perfect for that, right? So what better way to maybe show that off by just making a toolkit for something like EOS? And so what I have up here is just a very simple almost like an application flow diagram. It's not a wireframe because my application isn't focused on that yet. It's more about the idea. I built like applications before. Like I have one up here called DB Spy, which is kind of a precursor to what I want to build for EOS in a way, where I have like drag and drop, tables and different column names and logic gates for primary and foreign keys and links between them and dynamically generated scripts, right? And I want to do something like that for something like EOS, right? Because again, that's a huge barrier for a lot of people. People don't have time to understand all the nuances with EOS, but maybe through some explanatory sections within an application, you could get people up to speed in a few clicks to add some logic to existing contracts. So we would start off with a account authorization through something like Anchor, have a plug in there, and then we could create a script against contracts. And so the way this, I almost envision this working is we have a whitelist of particular contracts, maybe contracts that are reviewed by the community, and we can assign those or attach logic to those contracts that allow people to build other types of contracts, right? So think of it like Voltron or really Legos, right? You have, or think of it like math. If you're more of a math person, you have 1 + 1 is 2, and so you have this notion of the add symbol. And whether I'm doing sophisticated math, air quotes, or very simple math, the notion of that being tested over time, the idea of the additional symbology is the same. So we can embed different types of logic operators. So and, or, not, less than, equal to, right, greater than. We can assign those logics and compare different types of queries within the EOS network. And based on the logic of those, we can then attach an action, right? That would come from the contracts. And, some examples of that could be you transfer an asset based on the action of that. You could assign time, right? Not just digital space, but time. So you have both time and space introduced into this application that allows people to interact, I think, in a different way than what we've seen in blockchain. But it's more of a, hey, we have these precompiled common logic things that humans use, right? When managing assets or doing deals, we have common logic that we use, right, for them to make decisions, to make educated decisions. This is making those autonomous on the blockchain, when we interact with them, and it's exposing it to the assets on that chain. And based on the results, we can do an action. You can even do a token transfer, and we can program those effectively and repeat those functions a set number of times, or it can be based on an expiry of a date and time. So we can have it execute just once, or we can have a way to dynamically and autonomously execute that, on a daily basis, or, you can pretty much do it in your sleep, right? And that's something that's really cool, because now you've introduced a way to abstract away all the challenges with some base business logic. You're showing some concept of how to do it, almost like the way Excel transformed businesses. And over time, the vision would be that we continue to develop these. We develop more tools inside this to allow for greater sophistication of things that most businesses or companies or entrepreneurs could benefit from. you allow for the exposure of their assets potentially on this application, right? So think real world assets, real world data sources. And now you're introducing logic to the world for anybody who has access to this application to interact with their EOS account. And you're basically, introducing cement where there was once quicksand. You're introducing steel where there was once just cement, right? It just totally transforms the way people can interact with one another, make deals with one another. They don't need to go through a middleman. And in some ways, I would consider even an application as a middleman. This is at the very form, raw, contract, logic, and users. So it's really boiling it down to the essence of what smart contracts and blockchain were all about when this whole thing first started. So I think it's really interesting. And I forgot to mention one other thing that I want to do in this application is with the logic operators that we're showing here. So one of the questions that there might be is, well, Phoenix, right now there isn't a lot of sources that, like, say, a traditional company would have available on the blockchain for different reasons. There could just be a lot of barriers to some of these emerging companies doing this type of thing. So how do we still get them exposure to blockchain? How do we enable them to maybe solve some of their problems or resolve some concerns of trust, right, with their partners? Well, one of the things I'd want to do with this application is have a feature set that allows for an external API source to be introduced in the logic. What an API source is, for those that are not developers, it's just a way for one program or one application to talk to some remote data source, right? And now I've not only introduced, the ability for users to query something within the EOS network, like say a particular record within a multi-index table, but now I'm introducing time, right? Like a date and hours and minutes and seconds based on the EOS time. I think that's available, or we could get that resolved. But I'm also now introducing, external API sources, and those API sources could also be published for other users to leverage. So it really starts to open this up to what I really envisioned when I, was thinking about EOS, which is this more general purpose, almost like a architecture tool, right, with common building blocks for how you implement smart contracts. Doesn't necessarily mean that this is the one application to rule them all, or it helps game apps do their thing. That's not what I'm interested in, and I've said that many times. What I'm more interested in is, allowing actual human beings that are looking to do deals with other humans. How do we get closer towards that? I think this gets us closer towards that goal. Now, it doesn't have like the arbitration layers or any of those things, but I think before you can do that, you need sort of these very basic building blocks that really reduce the barrier of entry for people to start to take advantage of this technology. And so with that, I just wanted to share my concept with the world. I wanted to share it with the community. I want to get some feedback if you guys think this is something you'd be interested in. Is it too crazy? What's the level of interest engaged from the community? That's what this is about, because it's just an idea after all, right? But ideas can change the world, and I'd like to think that a small part of what I do maybe helps us get closer towards that. So. With that said, that's one of my ideas. I'll be presenting next couple days, idea number 2, and I'll be hoping to refine this idea ahead of the Ideathon official pitch. So that was one of the reasons why I wanted to go live on this video, is to work on presenting the problem I'm trying to solve. The problem I'm trying to solve here is the barriers to entry with interacting with assets on a blockchain. and really effectively creating their own smart contracts based on other contracts on that chain. And so this is a way to help address that issue, right? And also introduce ways to, say, combine traditional data sources through API calls, right, with other logic that resides on the blockchain to create applications or to create solutions for users. So, love to hear your thoughts on that. Let me know what you guys think. It could be used for, crazy purposes too. I don't have any control on that. Obviously, some people could publish betting, betting type solutions on this, right? Because you have your API calls that are external, and you can effectively create your own consensus layers by adding several different API layers, right, to the results of an outcome. And based on the outcome with your peers or with the pool of people, you could maybe transfer some assets, right? I mean, I'm not here to tell people how to use these tools. I'm just here to say, I think this approach has some value, allows for people to have a sandbox to create their own expression of business logic with assets that reside on a chain and those that don't, right? And over time, the trust and history of those things that are built on this tool can be exposed, right, for the community to see. And that will reinforce itself over time so that better tools and better logic is developed. And perhaps even a self-generated Ricardian, a Ricardian explanation for what the logic does, right? You can start to see those things. And those are things that, I've played around with the traditional databases, how you parse code, for example, to make up the architecture of a database, an existing database, through, say, a database dump. So I envision something similar like that with, contracts, right? That would be another thing I'd like to submit. That's a hint there. So hope you guys are having fun with the Ideathon. Love to hear your thoughts on my idea. And with that, I'm going to sign off. This is Phoenix. Hope you